Chapter 341. Midnight and I had to eventually return to Earth number 1. We still had jobs there after all. Our reasons for visiting Earth number 2's Japan had been resolved, successfully even. We could now properly use contingency, as we had magic eyelashes, and some that were less magical and others that were potentially non-magical. There was still a lot to think about with material components. Maybe when they added another day into the week, I could get all that testing done. Wait, wasn't there a spell for that? No, all the time manipulation magic was too transient. Even time stop itself gave less than a minute of relative time, and that was as expensive as gate. Not a particularly efficient use of mana unless you really needed to do something with it. There were other things to deal with before diving down any of those rabbit holes. After we took a break, mists appeared in the orb in front of me. It was a cube, of course, but it worked for scrying surprisingly well. The intuition of tech supers was kind of scary in some ways. I certainly wouldn't have gone from a surface to display information into multiple surfaces so rapidly and decisively. I was pretty sure Wilhelmina was still on probation for how much power she used making it, though given the rate at which she charged for her services, maybe not. It was a good thing all my association with her had been voluntary study and not a commission. I kind of wanted some more magic bullets, though. Specifically the dispelling sort, as I could make some regular bullets magical probably. Was that mana efficient enough to make it worthwhile? Another route to consider when I obtained infinite time. The scrying cube was being really stubborn about forming anything today. Probably because I didn't know what I was looking for. Someone that might have my sort of magic hiding in Earth number 2, maybe in their Japan but maybe not, was a pretty vague guiding post. Nothing, I sighed. Your turn, Midnight. What's the actual goal? He asked, finding whoever it was that shoved away my scrying. Right. Sometimes Midnight went about scrying in a way different enough from myself to provide some results where I failed. This time, at least we split up the mana costs. He didn't form anything either. I'm not sure about this path, he said. Yeah, it's not being pulled into a scrying anchor that we can brute force past or anything. But, I pondered. I have a guess. How about we both cast at the same time? Splitting the mana, Midnight asked. Won't that drop our upgrades a couple points? I shook my head, not splitting the mana, just doing it simultaneously. What happens with the scrying orb here if it works? Midnight asked. Overlapping images, maybe? It would be better than nothing. Or we cancel out from the beginning. I nodded. Or that. I doubt I'd try if we weren't bonded. We should hopefully minimize interference. I don't know if you can tune to what I'm looking for exactly, but try. Midnight gave a sort of shrug, the best a feline could do anyway. I'll do it. The two of us gathered mana at the same time, a total of 22 points between us. That would be a spell beyond normal limits if it was just one thing. But it was probably far less powerful in actuality, since it was just separate things. I focused hard on what I had felt. I had an intuition which might lead to nothing, but it was the best angle I had. Someone with magic like me, hiding and even counter-scrying after they pushed me away. That would explain the drain on non-detection, right? There could have been a million other explanations. Maybe it was my lucky day for once. Or maybe it was the fact that we were trying things that most people would never have the chance to. A wizard and a normal familiar could only go so far compared to one that was sapient to begin with. The mist swirled, parting just long enough to reveal a scene. I caught a glimpse just before I was thrown back. Midnight also collapsed to the ground as some sort of mental backlash moved us away. This time, the spell fell flat instead of continuing. Perhaps because we were looking for a certain primary target instead of accidentally stumbling across them. I thought I recognized something, but of course such a short glimpse wasn't sufficient to know anything for certain. I furrowed my brow. I thought I saw something for a moment. Should we play back the recording? Midnight suggested. I knew about the recording, of course. That wasn't the issue. Let's wait, I told Midnight. Would it be better for us to stand apart, or together? Can you go wait in the B2 rec room? I suggested to Midnight. I'll explain later. Sure thing, he said immediately. That showed a lot of trust after asking him to do something for no explained reason. It wasn't that weird, but it was still inconvenient to just go somewhere for no reason. As for myself, I would be going to floor 6. Francois would be happy to see me, and perhaps happier to know I wasn't coming with a complaint about some sort of flaw in my outfitting. It happened part way through Francois ranting about magical clothing. If I could just get my hands on some, he commented, I would be able to determine if I could infuse such things in our gear here. Wouldn't that be great? It really would. I wasn't sure how long I'd have to remain in my old world to secure magical clothing, though. At least in a way that wouldn't make people angry with me. I'd have to have money or have people owe me something. Sir Calman might do a favor for me, but we tended to keep things square enough between us between actually getting paid and helping each other with quests and stuff. Maybe I could just keep some of the money in gold coins. It was relatively more valuable to convert, except for purchasing exclusive magical things. But that wasn't important right now. What was important was that my non-detection spell was draining, even though I was placed central to a few of our local scrying anchors. I didn't know exactly where they were, but I had some approximations given that they had to cover all the floors. Worst-case scenario, there were actually more scrying anchors than I suspected. That should draw any focus away from me. Would non-detection still drain even with scrying anchors helping? It was certainly happening, though I didn't know what that said about my target. We hadn't gotten to review the footage yet, precisely because of this. If they saw that we actually knew something, they might. I don't know what they'd do. They were in Earth number 2 after all. Actually, the fact that they could target me here was kind of disturbing. I tried to act natural, which ultimately mean half-heartedly responding to Francois. Well, I'll try. It's been harder to travel certain places recently. That was true. Was there something familiar about this presence? Was it really just that we'd been scrying them earlier? Funnily enough, the presence became more clear when my non-detection finally ran out. This person was good enough to wrestle against, who knew how many scrying anchors and overcome that. Across dimensions, I wondered if they had their own block of diamond to use as a scrying orb. She might have something better. If I was recognizing the presence I thought I was. I didn't actually know that many good diviners, though. My conversational ability suffered as I continued to try to look normal. Magical clothing was suddenly an awkward topic. But I probably didn't react too obviously to the scrying, right? Should I have tried to shove it away instead? I wondered if they'd found Midnight, or if I was first. Couldn't text him yet, though. The sensation faded. I had an official guess now, but how would Zenthras Hitris even get to Earth number 2? Aside from one of the portals from my old world, or making her own. In other words, in exactly the same manner as I had. Yeah, that wasn't actually a hard question to answer, even if it was some other mage. Though I wasn't certain the diviner was a mage, and not some specialist class. We hadn't interacted that much. I waited another half hour to contact Midnight. I wasn't scryed again, or they hid it better. Did you feel anyone scrying you? I asked Midnight. I would have suggested checking your non-detection, but I couldn't be certain they weren't already looking. Perhaps something I should have anticipated before we made our attempt, but I wasn't even a couple years experienced with advanced magic. Before that, it was all theory and shocking grasp. I did, I think, he said. Non-detection certainly faded. Why was I hanging out in the rec room? Oh, scrying anchors. Was there one there? Midnight asked. Should be some around there. If you were right next to one, it might actually have been less effective. Right, Midnight said. This all makes sense, I guess. So, my guess is Zentha Kitris. That diviner that sent Izzy your way? Ultimately, yeah, I nodded. Allies of some sort with Master Uvithar too. We might be able to use our combo to find him as well. Is it okay to speak now? If she can constantly monitor us for this long without me noticing, I shrugged. There's literally no point in being secret. And if it's someone else, I guess that will depend on the recording. I doubted it would be more than a few frames, based on how quickly it had come and gone. We looked up the video and pretty quickly found the right part. We zoomed in on the image of a woman. Is that her? Midnight asked. You know, I have no idea, I admitted. What? Midnight tilted his head. I don't know what Zentha Kitris looks like. Isn't she famous in your world? It's not like people were posting portraits of people all around town. We didn't have pictures, or the internet, or social media. Right, Midnight said. I'd just assumed you would have magic versions of some of those things. Maybe, I said, but not in random villages. And Master Uvithar was more focused on the books than on other extraneous magical things. So what do? We text Izzy the image. Isn't that risky? Midnight asked. Not really. If it's Zentha Kitris, they're acquainted. And she'd probably not be an enemy of us either. If it's not her, then she doesn't know anything and they'd have no reason to bother her. We should probably show her in person anyway. Isn't it a brigade thing to not copy images? These were my images, but it still might be better. My phone should be secure from snooping, but Izzy's might not. If this woman was some sort of villain, we didn't want some other villain to try to join up with her. Though that would be a pretty specific worry. Yeah, I recognize her, Izzy said. That's Madame Kitris. Izzy squinted. Why is she sitting in front of a television? This is why scouts were important. They noticed details like that. She's on Earth number 2. What's that? The one with the magical girls and at least one guy, I explained. She hadn't ended up in that particular series of shenanigans with us, but we'd talked about the mission somewhat. It was nothing that directly affected the security of this Earth after all. And the ninjas, Izzy said, some of which also came here before that. Right, I agreed, though they might have been unassociated. Probably connected to some extent, though. So what's she doing there? Izzy asked. Presumably not being somewhere else, I said. Like our old world, to stay away from some shenanigans. I haven't asked her. Was it risky to use sending to contact her? What if I was in the same dimension? Was Uvithar with her there somewhere? I was going to find out. For the first time in forever, I was closer to answers. I just needed an excuse to go back to that world before she ran. Though if she was going to run, she might have already done it. And if she couldn't create her own gates, then she might not be able to. The brigade would give me time for personal missions. Maybe I could even bring backup, though the locals might also suffice. Chapter 342. Instead of running off to another world planning to search an entire country for a single individual, we stayed on Earth number 1. I didn't even know what I would say to Zentha Kitris if I found her anyway. A few frames of video weren't enough to determine where she was staying inside a building. At least, not in a parallel world. If we had full access to everything in Earth number 2, maybe Calculator could figure something out. Though most of his work had a lot to do with familiarity with New Bay in particular. All we really had was an image of someone in a traditional building. Master Uvithar had told me not to contact him with sending. Nobody had said the same about Zentha Kitris. Maybe because we'd never met. She wasn't even in the same world as the people I expected to be a problem, and furthermore, there was one important detail. I was tired of not learning anything, so I had to at least try. It was time to cast sending. This is Turlough, former student of Master Uvithar. I can guarantee I'm not working with whoever you're hiding from. I want some answers. For the sake of making it more probable that she actually received a cross-dimensional sending, Midnight sent one too. If we were going to get a response, it should come within 30 minutes. The time came and went without anything, during which we recovered slightly more than half the mana spent. We can keep spending mana on this, I said, but if she's blocking them, it might take a lot. Or maybe we have to put together a more powerful message somehow, like we did with scrying. However, if she's trying that hard to not be contacted, she'd probably just not respond. We need something more that demands a response, but I have no idea what to say. Me neither, Midnight admitted. Izzy's met her, though. Briefly, I clarified, for business. They weren't close friends or anything. I pondered for a few moments. Maybe in future messages, we should tell her she would be safe here on Earth number 1. I don't know if she'd understand which was number 1. Just here, then, I emphasized. But I don't want to spend all our effort on that just yet. Before we try next, I want to have some plan to enhance things, and this is just one of the mysteries on our plate. Are there many others? Midnight asked. Yeah, I said, like, what is Flasher up to? What's up with material components anyway? How did Zeb actually manage to attract squirrel number 1? You mean Douglas? Yeah. Her. Dumb luck and persistence, I think, Midnight said, though it kind of is her entire class. I nodded. She was so good with the big things and so bad with squirrels. Totally. So about material components and stuff, do we even have any spells with unresolved ones? We're pretty sure contingency is near optimal now, right? And we've had stone skin covered since early on. What those components were was never in question, I said. Just whether we could get some of them. The real question I have is why. Why components at all? Why those spells? How did people figure that out? It's written down in the textbooks, but they haven't just always existed. They were written down by someone at some point, edited and copied. Well, the spells just don't work without them, right? So people picked some spells and had to experiment. Right, I said. Oh, and there is another one, scrying. Though we tend to call things that aren't consumed a focus. Contingency has both. What makes that one so special? Long-term temporal extension of short-term effects seems to be the biggest part, I commented. Even inactive, it's essentially extending some spells 10 or 100 times, sometimes more than that. That's fair, then hear me out. What makes Stone Skin so different from Energy Ward that it needs them to be functional? Diversity, I asked. It kind of works against all forms of kinetic impact, which is less specific. It's also higher level, Midnight pointed out. Maybe it's further removed from magical context, so it's more difficult, I suggested. After we discussed for a while, we came to a conclusion we'd touched on previously. Maybe there could be other things that could use material components. Certainly, it was worth ruling out. So it comes back to figuring out what they are, I said. I have some spare mana and advanced divination magic, so… I shrugged. Maybe I'll try it. Do you need a mirror, he asked, to see things in? That's not necessary for many things, I said, though I hadn't used many other forms of divination, had I? Mostly arcane sight and locate object, before it all became one specialization or whatever I should call it. But I kind of want to get a picture. I should get one of those compact mirrors for convenience. The surface of my phone when the display was off would kind of work, but that didn't sound super reliable. But I didn't have a compact mirror, so it was off to the scrying orb. Literally nobody else could use it anyway, so it wasn't like I would be interrupting anything. Except I was wrong. Bolster was there. She looked over as the door opened, just nodding before turning back to whatever villain she was trying to track. The image didn't last that long before fading out. Sorry about that, I said. Also, congratulations, you've learned a very useful new spell. She'd been having some trouble with that previously, mostly because it was near the edge of her fatigue limit. Then again, all of the Portal squad was surpassing in level where I was when I first came to this world. I'd been pretty behind, but that was still good for a few months. It was about done anyway, she said. Do you need this? We can wait until you're done. Bolster shrugged. I think you're overestimating my mana capacity. I've barely got 2 castings in me. Speaking of which, now I get to go push myself to the very edge of mana exhaustion for training. Thanks for recommending that one, by the way. I love feeling like I'm about to pass out. I had a feeling she was being sarcastic. Do you want to learn the method where crystals build up inside your blood vessels? She made a face. That sounds terrifying. I'll pass. Thus, we were left with the scrying orb, which hopefully also worked for other divinations. Well, I said, any reason not to start at the top? Midnight pondered for a moment. I don't think so. Then we'll do that. I made certain the recording swapped over to the next file so that I didn't get piles of newt eyes mixed in with a villain survey. I made note that we needed something to let people know if the room was in use to not mess up the recordings as well. Come on, Magic Cube, show me some material components for storage. How much mana should I use? I literally had no idea. I gathered a double handful about what I would use for scrying, and just let it flow out of me into the idea I had. If I stuffed too much, it might turn into a different spell or just fail. My instincts settled on 8 as the last points of mana reabsorbed slowly back into me. There were barely any swirling mists of uncertainty before I saw an image of myself using storage. It didn't look like much. There was something roundish in my hand, and then there was not. Then an apple appeared in my hand. That repeated several times before everything faded. Oh great, I said. I guess having a demonstration of a spell isn't that bad, but that's pretty expensive. And without the mana flow, it's kind of useless. I could just cast the spell myself. What were you focused on? Midnight asked. I was focused on the storage spell and material components, I said. Maybe I was thinking about the things that go into storage and not the other way things could go into it. My words even confused myself. I'll try something else. Material components for Firebolt, I guess. That was the second one. I concentrated, gathering a bit more mana just in case I needed it to get something like what I wanted. However, I instinctually hit the limit at 8 again. So there was some actual spell here that I was tapping into, probably. If I were to name the spell, it would be Display Magic, which wasn't getting me any idea about material components at all. I literally just saw fire gathering in my hand and forming into a firebolt and setting some target dummy on fire. It was just me using the spell. Well, this isn't particularly productive, I admitted to Midnight. You want to try? Sure, he said. At least he could get experience from trying things out that didn't have to do with combat. The next spell was Shocking Grasp, and it showed him using the spell around his tail. Little zaps of electricity were the distinguishing factor there before he tapped the leg of a target dummy with it. Huh. That was all the response I had. I wasn't thinking about using it with my tail, Midnight said, confused. I don't think I'd ever considered it. Doesn't it have to be used through your hand? Well, I shrugged, it can be a whole body thing. It's just touch, right? And I use it on my staff sometimes. Right, Midnight said. I forgot about that. Do you think my tail is better? For you? I shrugged. Keeps your paws on the ground. Depends on if you can hit people with it. Do you think this spell is showing us a better way to cast other spells? I don't know if that makes sense, Midnight admitted, but it could. I guess next is Grease. I'll give it one more try to see if we can learn something. Midnight once again appeared in the image, though his body didn't particularly do much until he cast the grease spell. Then some generic figure walked onto the grease on the undefined floor, slipping and falling. Yep, that's the grease spell all right, Midnight said. I think we're done here, unless we want to spend another 8 or 16 mana. A shame. I wanted some answers, but I didn't even get useful questions. Normally, questions went to Calculator. However, Calculator was a busy man, and he didn't need to do more thinking about something that was so obviously useless. Midnight and I did know someone who might appreciate a break to think about stuff, though. Also, she was surprisingly helpful with magic. We caught Great Girl coming back from a patrol. She went straight to one of the break rooms, just shrinking down into a chair, quite literally. She wasn't as concerned about looking tall when she was buried in cushions. Hey, I said, want to watch some videos of magic? Anything new? She asked as she accepted my outstretched phone. Were you filming in a void or something? This isn't one of the training rooms. This is one of the angles on the scrying orb, I commented. It didn't show anything revelatory from a different direction, so I'd just picked one of the video files. So you have a thing that shows you performing magic. She looked up. Is that it? I shrugged. It was supposed to help me figure out material components, but this was all it did. I was wondering if you could discover its purpose. Is it cheaper than just casting the spells? Could be for teaching. I frowned. Master Uvathar just cast the spells. So we could feel the flow of mana. Not that I had the points to learn most things, and spells usually just worked anyway. Also, it's not cheaper than most things. It's 8 mana. Oof, I was thinking it should be a cantrip. Certainly not much more. She continued to look at the video as she lazed about in the cushions. This firebolt is flashier. What do you mean? I asked. It goes whoosh before the real spell begins, she said, backing up the video. See? Does it not normally do that? I couldn't exactly cast firebolt in a break room. I don't think so, Great Girl said, though I haven't been in squads with you using that frequently enough to be sure. Usually you don't have a lot of extra effects, though. Ooh, tail magic. Cool. So she'd gotten to Shocking Grasp. Is that better? We repeated our earlier discussion. Maybe it would be, but that didn't seem like the point if there was one. Assuming a semi-spell I pulled out of advanced divination magic actually had meaning might be the issue here. It's like a cartoon, Great Girl said, as the non-figure slipped on the grease spell. It's so exaggerated. I don't know if a spell that shows an exaggerated version of something else is practical, I said cautiously. Did you try actually displaying a spell? Great Girl asked. What do you mean? Well, your intent was to get something related to material components. None of these spells have any, do they? But more importantly, you didn't try to do the thing that got these results. So if you tried to display a spell with your divination magic, do you get this? Got a mirror. Chapter 343. I took a good look at the mirror in front of me, as the majority of the mana I had gathered was reabsorbed back into me, wherever mana went. That seemed like something I should know, but I didn't. It was showing a spell, the thing I'd been doing for a while, except it cost less. You got the wrong powers, I said to Great Girl. What do you mean? She asked. You should have been a mage. That wasn't even an option, she pointed out, and I like my powers. I wouldn't have wanted my hobby to become my career. You're good at this, though, I said, though I guess you're also good with your actual powers. Am I? She asked. Do you know how long it took me to figure out I could invert my power? Nobody who didn't already know was in range to overhear, but she mostly just didn't like being small. It was pretty useful, though. I shrugged. Do you know how many years it took me to learn anything real about magic? I only knew the surface level before I came here, and that was like 20 years of being a mage. That's because you didn't have access to natural upgrades, right? Great Girl commented. Wait, aren't you 25? Or 26 or something? Did you get your powers when you were 5? Anyone can pick a class as soon as they can operate the system windows, I commented. That's pretty risky, she said. I knew what I was doing, mostly. If it hadn't been for aspect of the Barbarian, I would have been fine. But back to the topic at hand. This is a different spell, I said, showing her the replication of the Mage's reach spell in the mirror. It repeated the casting process over and over. It also didn't come with any sort of magical sensation, but it was cheaper than the first spell and seemed like it would repeat for a while. So that means the other one was doing something else. Midnight leaned forward slightly to see the mirror better. Presumably, it did what you were trying. I sure didn't see any material components in the previous ones, I grumbled. What was different between that one and this one? We'll have to repeat with a known point of comparison, Midnight said. How about Firebolt? At least this spell was cheaper. I sought out a vision of the spell Firebolt, and I got pretty much the same thing as before. This spell was just cheaper. Except, it's not as flashy, Great Girl commented from the next seat over. The recording of the expensive one had that flash. Does that mean I should shove the mana into an initial burst to get more power? I pondered. Was that what you were looking for? Great Girl asked. Did you want more power, or did you want material components? Material components, I guess. But I don't believe I can put a flash into my pocket. It's ignition, Midnight declared. I mean, I think that's it. Ah, Great Girl nodded. Bat guano. I was extremely confused. What? Like for Fireball? Oh, that's right. You don't know Fireball. Why don't you know Fireball? How many 20-foot radius areas of non-flammable material do you think exist in this city? I countered. Probably at least a oopal, she said uncertainly, drawing out the word. You could go out to the bay. Throwing a fireball into the bay isn't useful, even if there was a villain there. What's this about bat guano? It's the traditional material component, a costless one, she explained. Usually wizards carry around a pouch full of random crap like that. Some of them are kind of jokes. Guano is flammable, so fire. There have to be better options, I said. Why does it have to be that? She shook her head. It doesn't, really. But if we assume Midnight is correct, the spark might actually be a clue as to what sort of material components you would need. Maybe tinder. You know, the kind for lighting fires. I know what tinder is, I said. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to try that. But storage didn't look like much, and shocking grasp was even more just the same. Maybe you already know that one, Midnight said. Maybe the material component for shocking grasp is us? Why would that? But you have to. I stopped myself. There were tons of things that I thought had to work a certain way that experimentation had shown very much did not. I summoned just the tiniest bit of mana, focusing a shocking grasp spell on nothing. Just the air in front of me. A tiny little more of electricity floated in the air there, and I reached out to grab it. It would have already been pretty weak given the small amount of mana, thus why I felt comfortable using it outside of a proper training area. But it barely even felt like a static shock. We'd have to try that in the actual training area, but I was pretty certain how it would work. Though if we were giving up a material component, then it was bound to be weaker for distance. So just worse than taking a small portion of chain lightning, which was a spell with a better base for such things. Technically, we'd be a focus, I decided, since we're not consumed, fortunately. Right, Midnight agreed. So what now? I guess we go buy stuff. I tilted my head. Shopping, Great Girl said, seemingly invigorated. Let's go. Shopping with Great Girl was exhausting. She dragged us along to a million places, sweeping things off the shelves. Even with her carrying all the heavy stuff, we still had to throw a lot of things in storage. After we paid for it, obviously, the biggest thing was all the hurrying from place to place. And here's a bar of soap, cooking oil, a moustache. Great Girl sure was taking a lot of random crap. Are you sure we need all this? It can be paid for by the brigade. This is work, she shrugged. Or I'll pay for it. Whatever, ugh, paparazzi. Is that some kind of pizza topping? I asked. It might be, if they're not careful, she said. Excuse us, we're trying to get by. I noticed she grew a few inches taller as she said that. I supposed it was supposed to be intimidating, but she'd stopped trying to match my height and settled on something closer to her actual height of 6 feet, so she didn't end up any bigger than me. Your mother is a hamster, Midnight said, rather aggressively, to one of the people with cameras and phones. Can you just say things like that to people? I asked Midnight as we moved along. To them, it would sound like a hiss. Oh right, Selmothian. This is probably enough stuff, I commented. Yeah, Great Girl nodded, we'd better get back to the brigade. It took a few minutes to get a proper vehicle, but that was better than walking the rest of the way back. We had to go to quite a few places to get all this junk. Hopefully, some of it did something. It would kind of be a waste since we hadn't actually tested any of it. Here's an easy one, Great Girl said, a proper focus for storage. This is a bag, I commented. It was one of the kind that had one strap that went over a shoulder. A messenger bag, I guess. Obviously, she said, for storage. I don't put things into something, I pointed out. It's magic. She rolled her eyes. I know it's magic. Now hurry up, my break is almost over. I was pretty sure it was over like an hour ago. Storage is putting something away or taking it out, so it should be better if you have something like this to represent the action. Also good for making it so people don't know you're magically pulling stuff out. I occasionally pull stuff out of pockets, I said. Is that more effective? She asked. Never thought about it, I admitted. Storage was cheap anyway. Its efficiency grew quickly with upgrades, so there was little mana to be saved. I put a few things into the bag, using storage once they were out of sight. It might have been a little bit different. Maybe you need to keep experimenting with that one, she said. It has to be better. Okay, how about this one? Your phone sends texts, right? It could make sending better. I don't know how we would know it's better, I said. Certainly not in a short time. Maybe I could message Comgal. He was in a really hard-to-reach plane. It's expensive and usually just works. Gate, she said, holding up an actual gate she'd bought at the hardware store. I put my face in my hands. Is that why you've been lugging that around this whole time? There's no way. Also, can't do that here. She sighed. Fine. She pulled out a dollhouse she'd bought. Use shelter, make it like this. Aren't these all foci? Not everything uses a focus, I complained. You don't know that? Try it. Sure, I guess, I shrugged. I'd rather have done something with the combat spells, though. I held in my hands the awkwardly sized structure as I gathered mana. The training rooms were more than big enough to fit shelter, so it wasn't crazy. Huh. There it was. I might have already been able to do this. Isn't this bigger than normal? Great Girl asked. Besides, do you usually get such detail? Midnight took the opportunity to stab me in the back. He usually makes a military bunkhouse. Hey, it's practical, and I made the beds more comfortable. It might be useful to have a predefined layout I could call upon without just using my memory. And if it was bigger, it might be interesting. Slight problem, I said as we came to the entrance. It's not enough bigger. Normal people would fit, Great Girl said, as she allowed herself to shrink to her normal height. I had to duck to not bump my head on the doorframe. It is a bit cramped still, but the total volume is definitely more. This has a whole layout. I have to agree, Midnight said. It's bigger. Maybe I just wasn't getting to the limits, I suggested. I'll test it, Midnight said, jumping down to the back of a couch, then scurrying out. A few moments later, he created a proper shelter next to the building. He scurried back inside. Nah, see, this is at least 50% bigger in 2 directions. Shorter, though, I commented. That's just the doorway. The ceiling is high enough. Just barely. It certainly wasn't that much lower than the other. And with the roof on this thing, the total volume had to be nearly double or triple. All right, Great Girl said. Now time to test durability. Everyone out. By everyone, it appeared she meant everyone that wasn't her. Once Midnight and I were safely outside, she burst through the ceiling, arms over her head. Shards of wood flew everywhere. Pretty fragile, she said. How tough is it normally? Smash Midnight's, I suggested. As she shoved her way through the rest of the shelter spell, it hit its limits and dissolved into nothing, the splinters of wood fading away. Great Girl kicked through the wall like it was made of balsa. Maybe it was, effectively, though she could probably do that with solid brick, especially at house-crushing size. Nearly her limit, somewhere around 12 or 13 feet tall. I can't say either of them are especially durable, Great Girl said. The structure is too different to know for certain. But I'd say they're close, and one is bigger. So next time you go camping, you have to carry the house. Put it in your bag, she said. Way too big for that. And it'll take up too much of storage's capacity. Maybe a small but detailed model, she suggested. Sounds expensive. Practical is fine. It was big enough like that. Still, it did something. That meant this wasn't all some sort of weird sidetrack. Did you grab any actual consumables? Candles? Great Girl suggested. If there's already fire, then Firebolt might get a boost. But we'd have to light them first. I wasn't going to carry around lit candles. Chapter 344. I have a problem, I admitted to Midnight. All this material component stuff we're doing, I'm not certain it's actually doing anything. Midnight was clearly confused at that. What are you talking about? We have extremely clear results. Do we? I asked. Sure, spells are better, but that doesn't mean it's because of the focuses. That was mostly what we had. Components that weren't consumed. It could just be because I believe it helps. The placebo effect. Does that matter? Midnight replied. It works, doesn't it? Yeah, but I wish there was some way to know for certain. If it's just my mind, it probably won't be as strong as using the right things. Then we'll go do that, Midnight said, beginning to move towards the door of the training chamber. What do you mean? We have people here who can help us figure those things out. If I was giving you something, my feelings might influence your results. But if someone you're not connected to chooses something, it will be pretty obvious. All you have to do is not look. Just holding something and intending to use it should work, right? I pondered for a few moments. I might be able to tell what it is by holding it. You don't have to touch things directly, though. It works with gloves at the very least. What if we put things in a box? I honestly haven't tried that, I admitted. Let's go. Old Shock was a busy man, but all of that business was for the sake of the power brigade. Actually, though, we didn't need him specifically. It was just that the tech guys had the most random stuff available. Since we needed someone, I just grabbed the closet guy. Intern number 1, you're coming with us. He was dressed in a white lab coat. His skin was weird. It had both the color and patterning of burlap. That and other physical differences indicated he was probably an alien. My name is... Your task is very important, intern number 1, I explained. You need to hand me the things I tell you. but also sometimes you need to hand me different things. I'm not quite sure what. We'll try to bring a variety of extra bits and bobs along so that you have some options, I concluded. I still don't really. He wants to do a randomized trial, Midnight explained, so we need things that are relatively light for the most part. That would be fine, but it could have been anything. We had some heavier focuses and stuff. I see, intern number 1 said. If you give me some further parameters, I can absolutely gather some materials to test with. Certainly, Midnight said. I believe Mage should be out of the room for this part, just in case. I can help you choose as long as I'm not watching the experiment. It shouldn't take long to verify one way or another, so we shouldn't need to include my mana pool. Mage, why don't you wait with the targets? We can limit it to a few spells that would be effective there. Sounds good, I said. I'll see you on B5. It took them maybe 20 minutes to come, arriving with a covered cart. I brought blinders, intern number 1 commented, holding them up. You'll still need to be able to see to target, but your peripheral vision could give something away. A color or size, perhaps. This guy was smart. We'd picked the right intern. I'll get in position then. I talked with Midnight, intern number 1 explained, and we'll be testing Firebolt, Water Blast, and Sonic Lance. I understand the first 2 of those take only a fraction of the energy, correct? A little more than a third, I confirmed, or exactly 40% if I maximize them all. Excellent. Now then, I'm going to be handing you small receptacles. Don't look at them, obviously. Try not to shake them either. I'm going to tell you which spell to cast. After you do so, I would prefer if you don't try to observe what I have given you. I will take notes on the results. First, though, I would like you to perform a baseline version of each. Should I do the cheapest? Whatever you can do consistently. Maximum or minimum, then? Cheap is better. I didn't know how many tests we might need to do. We activated the cameras. People needed to be able to watch their form, after all. The training rooms were for when you needed more space than a shooting range. I had enough different spells to test whether the new material components actually helped without going there. I could probably even include Chain Lightning or Blizzard, but they were several times again more expensive than Sonic Lance. 3 different things should be good enough. At the natural minimum mana levels, I cast Firebolt, Water Blast, then Sonic Lance in that order. The targets were quite resistant, and even if mine had been destroyed, they were also meant to be easily repaired or replaced. Good, intern number 1 said. Are you ready? If you could hold out your right hand. First, confirm that you can't see it. I can barely even see the barrier here. I tapped it with my left hand. So anything behind here is just nothing. Very well. I'm bringing you the first material component. It will be for the Firebolt spell. He kept his voice extremely neutral. Most likely, we could have had one further step where someone else who didn't know said the spell, but I didn't know intern number 1 well enough to determine his lying tics. I could barely do that with Midnight without drawing on our bond, and I spent way more time with him. I felt a small box be pressed into my hand, presumably with something inside. Ready? Whenever you are, intern number 1 confirmed. As long as it is firmly in your grip, do not hesitate. I drew upon about 1.43 points of mana. I had to keep track of that part myself, since we didn't have mana measuring instruments just lying around. It was possible the components might change the cost somehow, though unlikely. Either way, it was habit to keep track of my quantities. The Firebolt was excessively normal. Maybe I need to take it out. Please refrain from speculation, intern number 1 said. Head forward, please. I didn't look, I protested, and it will be best to keep it that way. I'm going to swap to the next one. This is for Water Blast. My hand briefly became lighter. I wasn't sure if this component was heavier or not. It kind of felt differently balanced, though. I gathered mana for Water Blast. No change there. I drew upon the material component in my hand. Magic flowed out of me, forming into a burst of water that tore through the target and scoured the wall behind it. I blinked. I'm going to log that one as improved, intern number 1 commented, unless you have some other comment to explain that. No, that was pretty clear. There was no point in being obtuse when there was something so different. Though it was kind of more than I expected a material component to bring things, Intern number 1 grabbed the box. Is this lighter? Well, yeah, the material component was consumed, I said. But that, he coughed. It certainly consumed more than I anticipated. It was certainly high. I wondered if Kithay was going to have to fix that wall. It might have gone deeper than the standard regeneration allowed. At least there shouldn't be anything important beyond there. Another thing placed in my hand. What spell is this for? I asked. Oh yes, sorry, Sonic Lance. I gathered 4 mana. A new target had dropped down to replace the other one, and an invisible force blasted it to smithereens. I staggered backwards as chunks of rubble flew from the other end of the target range, carried by a shockwave traveling down the contained target lane. Wow, that was loud. My ears hurt. Not so badly that they stopped working, however. I could still make out intern number 1 yelling, "Stop! Stop! No more testing!" Well, obviously I wasn't going to repeat that. It was a bit excessive. Can I turn around now? Let me cover the cart back up and take what you're holding. Intern number 1 did that. Then he let me look. Okay, so, he said, I'm going to go consult with Familiar. Don't touch any of that, please. Did he think I was going to ruin the experiment with curiosity? How rude, intern number 1. Nice one, dude. I turned to see Bombino, who had been several lanes down. But you're not supposed to break things that much. If you can trash the targets, you're supposed to put in a special materials request. I shrugged. Normally that doesn't happen. What did you do? I was surprised to hear from Calculator first. In person even. Testing, I said. Obviously. It worked. Surprisingly well. The back wall was crumbled. It was pretty thick, though. The deepest part went maybe a couple feet back into the concrete, but there was plenty more. Explain. I don't know. I'm still in the blind part of the experiment, I said. Who contacted you? The alarms, Calculator said. I saw someone else here with you. Ah, yes. That was intern number 1. Who? One of Old Shock's interns, probably an alien. Burlap skin. Billiop, Calculator replied. What was that? Oh, probably a name. I suppose you would know, I agreed. Anyway, you can ask him. And Midnight. He rushed off to go talk to him. Midnight was slightly concerned now. I looked at the back wall again. I think that was more power than Rocker can usually get. Significantly, Calculator confirmed, we did update things for sonic durability once he was recruited. What do you think happened there? Material components worked, I suggested. Obviously. Like, I wasn't supposed to know that, but the difference was quite extreme. Plus, the boxes got lighter, so the components had to have been consumed. Calculator wasn't just talking to me, of course. His fingers were flying across the keyboard of his tablet. Probably talking to intern number 1 and like 3 other people who were in crises. I've received a response from Billiop. He will be more precise in his choosing of material components. But you may complete the experiment in a different lane. Calculator ran over and grabbed a lane closed sign. He also pressed some buttons that retracted what was left of the target thing. Not that people wouldn't be able to tell things were wrong in that lane anyway. Actually, before you try again, get yourself checked out. I tapped my forehead. Helmet was on. You could still have damage to your ears. So Sonic Lance was off the table for a couple reasons. I still couldn't think of what would cause it to be boosted by so much. But Midnight had calmed down his worries and intern number 1 had new instructions. Firebolt again, he said. I cast Firebolt. This time it was pretty decent. Visually boosted. Maybe it was just lingering confidence, though, because it wasn't nearly as far. Though it was closer to what I might expect. Though my expectations for material components for spells that didn't need them were sort of up in the air. Firebolt. It was the same. Firebolt. Worse. Normal, maybe. Intern number 1 tried not to let me know how he felt about that. 3 good water blasts, though they were still rather conservative in comparison. The target was actually withstanding all of these in a row. The wall was, of course, untouched. The 4th water blast was normal. Normally, I'd go review the results with a team, intern number 1 said, but the results are pretty definitive. You're going to have a talk with Midnight about focuses. Okay, but why now? We were working on material components. That is why this is relevant, he hedged. He can explain what he thinks, and since I'm not a magical practitioner, intern number 1 shrugged. Why focuses, though? I made a face and felt my tusks rub against my skin. Chapter 345. As it turned out, people who were with you nearly constantly and knew you well were good at explaining things to you. I honestly don't know why intern number 1 didn't explain anything, because it only took a couple sentences. We met in a private room where he sat on the table and explained things. All right, Midnight said, so here's the deal. It looks like you can consume focuses. But they're designed to remain around, obviously, Midnight agreed. But when you were thinking of them as material components, they worked like that. Only more. Also, some people are very concerned about what happens to the components. They go into the spell, obviously, I said. Midnight shook his head. Normally, spells are extremely efficient with their usage, or mana is extremely powerful. If the matter was converted to energy, you're actually kind of losing out on a lot of efficiency there. Also, I think Billiop might have been freaked out over you potentially destroying bits of the universe a little at a time. Who? Intern number 1. I think there's something that says I'm fine, I commented. What was it? Energy cannot be created or destroyed. I think matter was included in energy there. So it probably all becomes something. Midnight gave his equivalent of a half-hearted grin. I think that probably is what people are afraid of. It's not like I could consume more than a few pounds of matter per day, I pointed out. There's so much universe that it wouldn't mean anything. You do realize that there's a whole lot of other people who could do that too, if they knew. Sure, I guess, I admitted. But they don't, unless they start experimenting with material components. Probably some people did that already. I thought for a few moments. It's a good thing Jerome has kept his focus away from offensive combat spells. We should probably warn him about this stuff, though. And he'll have to share with Haralam, and we need to tell the Portal Squad, which leaves 7 people we know about. That's a lot more than 1. I did some counting. Midnight and I, Jerome and his friend, Bolster, Bandage, and Boom. Oh, and Kithay. Right, we need to do a safety briefing. Or you can do that, and I can determine if I can consume just part of something. You're the official training lead. Damn it. And that's why you shouldn't try to consume big piles of diamonds. Any questions? Yeah, Bolster said. What was it that happened again? I pulled up a couple pictures. The target area got busted. Apparently this happens if you consume a small instrument, so emergencies only. I looked over the group. I wasn't certain if Kithay even had any offensive spells. She was hard into the utility and had a weird class anyway. Most of you can take this particular spell, but I think the important point is to generally recognize not to try to consume a lot of anything for any spell where you don't know the exact consequences of overpowering it. I got a message from Midnight. Then another one from Angelica a few moments later, but I held off on looking at that one since it shouldn't be relevant to the meeting. Good news, you can use just part of what you have, so you don't have to worry about your pockets being full of stuff. I might still want individual baggies for stone skin, but maybe I could use a few at a time to get a greater effect. They were cheap, but not that cheap, so I had to think about it carefully. Probably there was some upper limit that we hadn't yet determined. Anyway, since most of you had probably heard about our experiments beginning regarding material components, we thought it important to update you on the risks in case you had plans to experiment on your own. Bandage started to hold up her hand, then just spoke. Yeah, what happens with beneficial spells? Is it dangerous? It shouldn't be, but we'll test it before going beyond the limits we already have in mind. Maybe the explosions would be part of everything. We might need a volunteer, or maybe figure out if we could target a dummy. I guess I'd slowed a van, so I could probably haste inanimate objects too. We'd at least notice extra explosions, which is to say any explosions, even if the other effects were unclear. I was the last one out of the meeting room, and I stumbled into Great Girl outside. Well, she was kind of standing around waiting there, and she made a dramatic call as I walked by. Ugh, can you believe people? Yes, I said, but I presume that people have done something stupid and annoying? Don't you read your texts? I was in a meeting advising people on how not to blow stuff up on accident. I checked my phone. I don't have any texts from you. She waved her arm vaguely. Check Angelica's. I did. It contained a headline from some tabloid. Great girl and Mage dating? Shown were a series of pictures taken during our shopping excursion. It literally just looked like two people shopping. In super clothing, to be clear. People are stupid. Can't they tell we were on duty? Also, I'm not that well versed on the superhero dating scene, but do people normally have 3 people on dates? Midnight was prominently displayed on my shoulder. Nobody could miss that. They think he's a pet. That's dumb. And racist, I think? Tabloids are dumb, Great Girl agreed. They sure had a lot of speculation about things nobody had seen or could have known about. It was all phrased in a technically speculative manner that very strongly implied that they knew we were dating and had been for months and maybe were even getting very serious. Or something to that effect. It was hard to read. Not because it actually bothered me, but just because it was very poorly written slop. Is this going to harm your reputation? I've sent it to my publicist to deal with, Great Girl explained. How about yours? I blinked. Do I have a reputation? Do you? She blinked. You don't have any social media accounts. Exactly. Probably best to stay that way. I sure thought so. Why would I want to interact with random strangers? I shook my head. Anyway, why would it hurt my reputation? You're the popular one, so it would probably drag my image higher, right? It doesn't always work like that. I see. Well, I don't think this will be a problem. I don't currently have any nemesis that don't already hate you more. If anyone was stupid enough to come after you to bother me, I shrugged. I can't imagine they'd have much success. I took a good look at her face. Does this bother you? Even with a mask, her face was honest enough. I don't like people messing with me and my friends just for clicks. Don't they get paid? I asked. She chuckled. That's what I meant. Anyway, I'd just prefer that they not mess around with people like that, so that you don't have to explain to any future girlfriend. I frowned slightly. I don't think I would date anyone that would be fooled by such obvious nonsense, and they'd know Midnight. I guess that's true, Great Girl admitted, though if you were trying to date outside the cowl. I raised an eyebrow. I don't think I know a single person who doesn't know my secret identity. I doubt my social circles will change anytime soon, though I guess there are a few more orcs around now. Those orcs were ones that either weren't working for Dr. Doomsday or at least hadn't been caught. There were also some small populations that had been around before me. Other Type F worlds existed, and all that, they just weren't that common. There being a few dozen orcs out of a vast city of more than 10 million greatly limited the anonymity of green people with tusks. And I didn't want to use disguise all the time. That was for missions. Anyway, I concluded, I don't think this has much impact on my activities, though maybe we shouldn't hang out in uniform without a more obvious squad with us. That sounds about right, Great Girl acknowledged. More conservative material component testing revealed that it was a real pain to use them. I only had so many pockets, so unless things came in very small quantities or I started lugging around a big, obvious bag, then I couldn't really cover many different spells. I could have a lot of stuff in storage, of course, so if I had some time to plan out my uses, I could pull out things for about half my spells. The others we just hadn't figured out any material components that were appropriate just yet. Focuses, which was anything not consumed, were even bulkier. Contingency worked great because none of the shuffling stuff around was supposed to happen within hours of actual trouble. But if I wanted to enhance firebolt, grease, and then fly, I would need a fistful of tinder, a few ounces of oil, and then a big feather. Any properly sized feathers wouldn't fit in my pockets, though I might be able to stuff a handful of down in one of my pockets. Packets of oil weren't convenient, and for something like firebolt, I would usually want to use it several times. That meant being conservative with my tinder, which made it less effective. For offensive spells, a focus might be better. I only had a few of such spells, and I could vaguely categorize them into single target or area. Carrying around ice for blizzard was impractical, but I had a sapphire on order. It might be a good enough focus to do something without taking up much area. Though having to be conscious of the existence of everything, might be the biggest limitation. Carrying material components in my hand wasn't required, but if I didn't know where they were, they didn't work. We tested by putting things in different pockets. Lower intensity spells, of course. That meant I'd have to keep things in consistent pockets, which wasn't that big of an issue but further limited my options. War wizards probably had 2 or 3 things for their big blasty spells, if they knew about extra components like this at all. We didn't have a way to test if this worked with only the system and no ability to gain natural upgrades, so I couldn't even be certain how hidden this was. Midnight got the shortest end of the stick with his near-complete lack of pockets. His transforming suit could hold a few things in awkward lumps, and that was it. Oh, and we figured out what was up with the representation of Shocking Grasp. The focus it needed was a surface to hang out on. It appeared that necessary focus made it more powerful, instead of just because it was limited in range. In short, I learned to zap people less effectively at a distance, which was just worse than creating a low-power chain lightning for the most part. When I could get it to work anyway, some spells just didn't exist below a certain threshold. I was keeping notes on different actual and potential focuses and material components. One more thing to think about, but like everything else, I would pick out the good ones. Eventually. Psst, Mage. I turned to see Shockwave standing in a dark hallway, which was odd because the brigade usually didn't let so many lights burn out. I heard a certain rumor. I'm not dating great girl. The blue speedster stood up straight. What? No, I don't care about that tabloid crap. Someone told me you could make spells better. I thought for a moment. Was it me? I've mentioned that before, but that's not new. I mean, more better, Shockwave said, like you could theoretically overcharge a haste spell to... I shook my head. I'm not allowed to haste you arbitrarily. We can schedule a training session, though. They sighed. Nobody will let me. They say it's not necessary, and that I only want to run faster than before. Well, yeah, I said. That's obvious. They put a hand over their heart. You wound me. I just want to make sure your new abilities won't hurt anyone. I heard there was an explosion. Here I am, bravely volunteering my body, and nobody will even hear me out. I shrugged. I'm not going against brigade rules. If you need it for a mission, I can haste you. I'll carry a clock in storage, I guess. Though maybe an hourglass would be better. I pondered. How about a grandfather clock, they suggested. Bigger is better. I can't carry one of those. Yet? Well, not for a long time, probably, and one wouldn't fit in a bag, so I couldn't enhance my capacity with a focus. But if we happen to need to haste you and there's one nearby... I shrugged. Got it. I'll look into missions involving old mansions right away. Shockwave saluted, then scurried off. I hadn't really agreed, but I wasn't against going on missions in general, and Shockwave was a very effective teammate. During the course of a haste spell, if they couldn't solve all of our issues, we were probably way over our heads to begin with. Chapter 346. It seemed there weren't any missions in spooky old mansions for Shockwave to pick up, so Midnight and I ended up going out on various other missions. We practiced with material components and focuses, though we avoided any offensive spells. We were patrolling with just us and Jim when Trigon Terror chose a nearby grocery store to rob. It didn't seem like a great target to me, but he wasn't the first villain to do so. Rodentia was the most frequent offender, given her particularities. What do you know about that guy? Jim asked, even as he was likely looking up the villain's data. He was quite pleased to be able to speak his native language around us, so he did so. Midnight and I constantly had translation going for Midnight to be able to speak English properly. Let's see. I tapped one of my tusks. I think he was a splitter. 3 bodies that he can sort of teleport, chain into new positions as he creates and uncreates them. High mobility and annoyance, I explained. How annoying, Midnight commented. We'll have to watch for collateral damage. That meant no lasers, among other things. Jim should be fine, though. He was able to focus his attacks on a particular area. Even if he missed, it shouldn't damage other things if he was careful. He did some sort of psychic assault thing, which should probably be good against Trigon Terror, as he should take significant concentration to use his abilities, assuming we could connect. The target was a local supermarket, which despite the name was not a supermarket, but a rather modestly sized store that carried mostly goods with superhero brand deals. And other supers, of course. I was pretty sure they sold Power Brigade energy bars, though I would never buy those because I could just have as many as I wanted. They weren't particularly tasty, but they were convenient during training, and they weren't bad either. There are 3 of us, Jim commented, which corresponds to the theoretical maximum number of bodies Trigon Terror can manage. Should we split up and try to restrain one each? I shook my head. That doesn't sound useful. If he can just teleport out of our hands, it wouldn't even matter if we caught him. And if he can't, we should just have someone block the door. I looked at Jim. Of the 3 of us, he was the best suited to blocking a door. He could spread his mass of tentacles to the side to cover the whole thing. While that wasn't actually the amazing physical barrier it looked like, it was a great psychological barrier. People didn't like interacting with uncommon physiology. I will gladly take on this task, Jim said. If you could herd our target into my attacking range, I will contribute as I can. Great, assuming he hasn't already run off. The shouting coming from ahead indicated we were approaching our target. We had been moving at a quick pace, a slow jog so as to not arrive out of breath. I was pretty sure Jim had to breathe. Either way, I did. More broccoli, the shouting resolved into individual words coming from several places. And chicken. Don't go putting any turkey in there either. I know my fowl. Oh good, he's still there, I commented. I couldn't look directly at Midnight hanging out on my shoulder, so I just sort of tilted my head. You think Dimensional Anchor would stop this guy? We'd have to hit him, so maybe, Midnight said, but haste is always good. I doubt it would take us more than a minute. A minute and a half now, at something like quadruple speed. Even if we couldn't cast more spells during that time, we could aim them more carefully, and a focus could bump that power up a bit. Since Shockwave had brought it up, I was now carrying a tiny hourglass. The quality wasn't great, but it would be better than nothing. This didn't seem like a situation where it would be worth it to try to consume a focus. So the boost would be relatively small. Consuming focuses was probably a bad idea regardless, since I had no idea what other consequences there might be aside from permanently deleting some matter, or converting it into magic, but from the perspective of most people that wasn't different. Did it matter that I turned the hourglass over when I cast haste? Probably not. It felt like a thing to do, though. I first targeted Jim, then Midnight and I. Multicasting was only good for more than 3 targets, so individual was the way to go, especially since we counted as 2 total. The automatic doors of the building crept open slowly. I slipped through, and Midnight scrambled down my arm and jumped to the floor. Jim took his position at the door. The first thing we needed to do was assess the safety of civilians. Trigon Terror seemed to have brought a knife, which was vaguely threatening. Weapons combined with certain powers could certainly be dangerous. The specific powers in question made a big difference in whether it counted as armed supervillainy. But it didn't really matter to me. Our job was to keep people safe first, then infrastructure, and of course if we could catch the guy, it would be best. It seemed that Trigon Terror had set up around the direct middle of the store. All 3 of him were standing around while staff filled a few shopping carts with the requested items. Trigon Terror was waving around his knife in a way that made me think he didn't know how to use it. I had a good view of his costume, which involved 3 white triangles on simple black cloth. He clearly didn't know a super tailor, as Francois would never have let that level of effort slide. I was pondering whether or not it was appropriate to call a triangle a trigon, and whether this guy even thought about it at all, when Trigon turned to look at me. One of him, anyway. "Stop right there, heroes," he said slowly. Well, probably normal speed. Interestingly, his other heads turned. Did his bodies not share processing information? How curious. Especially the way his power felt inactive. Did he make true clones or something? I couldn't think of any way it wouldn't be doing anything otherwise. "Trigon Terror, you are under arrest for supervillainy and stuff," I said. I gestured with my staff. "Turn yourself in, and it will be considered in your sentencing." Hopefully I spoke slowly enough. 2 of Trigon Terror's bodies looked towards the 3rd. That would have been a good time to smack them upside the head, but I wasn't that close yet and something was weird. What I could only presume was the main body responded. "No chance, copper. I'm gonna take you down." The other two of him suddenly flickered. I saw a connective blur as they were recreated. I could only watch one as it stretched around the shelves and ended up in the aisle next to me. So however that splitter ability worked, it required a connection of some sort. Weird. It also felt different. I could see the main body of Trigon Terror turning towards a civilian, but Midnight was over there now, so he'd deal with that. I immediately swung my staff, one-handed, but it would still be a solid bash on the head of the repositioned guy. There was no way he could. He immediately used his power again to recreate himself further back down the aisle, even though my attack should have been solidly at the limits of human processing time. My arm continued moving, jabbing behind me. I felt another surge of power as the one behind me did something. What sort of splitter power was this? I suppose it was possible for it to come with a secondary reflex power, but it was still annoying. I felt Midnight cast Shocking Grasp, a small spell, but if he could tag the legs of the main body, we'd be set. Yet I also felt powers activate there, rapidly displacing Trigon Terror. I couldn't pay too much attention to that, as I had two guys to deal with. Rather than chasing one down the aisle and letting myself get trapped, I decided to test his abilities. I took a stance in between two shelves so that they'd have to transmit through solid shelves. I could at least determine if they required line of sight. Two figures immediately appeared in front of me, stabbing outward. It would have been a bit tough to dodge them both if I wasn't hasted, but only a bit. As it was, I tried to whack the wrist of one body with my staff, and he zipped backwards. Why would a spatial displacement ability leave blurs? That didn't make any sense, nor did the costumes these guys were wearing. This guy, did splitters care if they were pluralized? Whatever. The costume wasn't just the triangles, but also, now that I saw it closer, a bunch of pleats. Inside those folds was white instead of black. Why? That made no sense. I was beginning to gather mana for another spell. I thought about using grease, but honestly, slow made so much more sense. I'd have to predict where they would pop out for grease, and if I could lower their reflexes with slow, I'd pretty much have this in the bag. I heard loud and strangely in-sync cussing behind me. It sounded like the main body had something very rude to say about fire. Presumably the fire shield Midnight had just cast. I was facing away from there, so I couldn't quite tell. Then something happened to trigger our contingency, activating Stone Skin from Midnight's end. I had my staff angled across the aisle when one of the splitter's bodies tried to recreate past me. The blur got shorter. That meant something, probably. The other one stabbed towards my front at the same time I knew another stab would be coming from my back. I let slow settle down around me. I was 99% certain I could avoid including myself or anything I didn't want to. In my left hand, I was still holding the hourglass. I probably should have put it in my pocket. Holding it might have been what made me decide on slow, though, and it sure worked. I knew that if I let the guy in front of me complete his stab, it would still harm me just about the same. Which was to say, not much, because my suit was extremely stab-resistant, and they hadn't gotten through force armor yet. Even if they did, could they break through Stone Skin? I doubted it. It was as I watched this guy stab towards me at a comically slow pace that I realized I had already figured it out subconsciously. That wasn't quite enough for me to completely avoid the sudden acceleration of the attack, but I did avoid taking a direct hit to my gut. His attack slid off my jacket as I cracked him in the chest with my staff. A simultaneous attack from behind finished off my force armor, which showed how hard these guys were stabbing, enough to really kill someone. I slipped the hourglass into my breast pocket and took my staff in two hands, properly wielding it to strike the two slowed speedsters. Because that was what they were, even if they only moved in weird bursts. It was why they blurred and traced a path around the aisles, and also why they had the reflexes to avoid my attacks. If they were focused on that, at least. I swept the legs out from underneath the guy in front of me, spinning around to handle the second. I shouted a warning for the sake of Midnight and Jim. They're not a splitter, but a trio of crappy speedsters. Who dare you? That was the third guy, probably. I could see him out of the corner of my eye even as I completed my backswing towards the second. Chapter 347. Based on how the first guy was toppling to the floor, being slowed slightly reduced the rate gravity affected him, and being hasted myself gave me significantly more relative perception of the event. These guys weren't tough. Not that I should have expected otherwise, since speedsters weren't known for their durability. Crappy speedsters even less so. Obviously, I'd only interacted with Trigon Terror for a short duration, but there were so many flaws in how they did things, I figured they must have stuck to petty crime, and even then, they would have had to be lucky to avoid trouble. Because only moving quickly in bursts kind of meant that they could still just be shot, and you didn't need to be a super to have a gun. The second one fell shortly after the first, as I whacked him with a good two-handed grip on my staff. The third one was already howling in slow motion as Midnight zapped him with shocking grasp. Jim stood guard at the front of the market, but he ultimately hadn't needed to act. A minute later, we had the villains' cuffed hands and feet, waiting for someone to come pick them up. We hadn't used any power-suppressing cuffs, because those were expensive, and, well, one of the guys sprang to his feet and then took off with their super speed. Which was to say, he stumbled forward with sudden momentum and face-planted extra fast. That's what I figured would happen, but I wondered how he didn't know that was what would happen. He didn't even do a fast shuffle, which would at least have been a good attempt. Enough of that, I said. Since we had them in custody, we were technically responsible for them. I didn't want any of them running out into the street and getting hit by the car. Think of the damage to the vehicle and the paperwork. So we interlinked their arms and recuffed them. One of them tried to use their crappy super speed to yank away when one hand was briefly free, but I had a proper grip, so the only thing he managed to do was dislocate his wrist. Faster was not always better. If this guy was actually a splitter, it would have been a terrible idea to shackle him altogether. That could have produced situations where he dropped the cuffs rather easily. But with triplets using crappy super speed, it was quite different. My senses told me they had not a single hint of actual splitter powers, and the triplets thing was easy to confirm when we demasked them and checked their IDs. Relatedly, I thought it was probably a bad idea to bring your ID to a crime. They looked pretty similar, but they weren't perfectly identical. I took notes on how to distinguish them in case it mattered in the future. Supervillainy would land them behind bars for over a year for just this incident, and they had other incidents to account for. There was something disconcerting about putting a bag into storage. Unlike the worries that Great Girl expressed, the bag itself wasn't magical, nor did it actually contain anything. I wasn't going to cause any dimensional rifts. It was just weird. Relevantly, without having the messenger bag available, I couldn't fit some of the larger and heavier items in storage, nor take them out, due to how it functioned as a focus. But I also didn't want a bag flopping around all the time, as it could easily be damaged by random attacks and get in my way during battle. I now had various knickknacks and baggies of stuff that made up material components and focuses for the majority of my spells. If I had time to plan out my moves, I would use them. Otherwise, I only kept the most necessary accessible. I didn't want my pockets to be overflowing with tinder and ice cubes. Obviously, I couldn't just keep out the larger things, like a broom for clean. Likewise, I never needed to cast shelter in a hurry, so having to retrieve the small model house wouldn't be an issue. I hadn't figured out a good option for every spell, even with the vague guidance from divination magic and my understanding of the spells, but overall I would be slightly more efficient, unless I was willing to consume proper focuses instead of just using them in a repeating fashion. If I had a bunch of lighters, I could make fairly powerful firebolts, and if I was willing to consume sapphires, I could make Blizzard quite a bit stronger. I had the feeling it would be very strong if I had some sort of enchanted ice crystals to consume, but that was a bit outside the realm of feasibility. So overall, I was stronger, and with preparation I could greatly increase my effectiveness. I still couldn't be certain if this was how material components and focuses were supposed to work or not. It was possible that not everything I had found different from the norm was intentionally hidden. Living in another world long-term might have influenced magic. I needed to talk to some mages. If only I could figure out how to do it without being at risk. Some people were definitely hiding some of this stuff. There hadn't been a Dr. Doomsday portal incident in so long that I almost forgot that they were a thing. I had kind of thought he might be done with whatever he was trying to gain from all that. Then most of the brigade was called to a meeting. Obviously, we couldn't shove all of our supers into one meeting room, so we were each assigned to a particular area. I was in a briefing room with Swiss arms. On some screens to the side, I could see others with telescope, move brain, and even Lady Light. Other rooms seemed to have non-executives taking the lead. "Where's Calculator?" I asked. "Calculator is on assignment," Swiss Arms said, waving her arms vaguely. So he was doing something secret. Or maybe he was captured somehow, and they didn't want people to panic. Though if that was the case, they probably would have sent for Midnight and I to get scrying directly. "Right," Swiss Arms said. "We'll answer questions as we can after, but I'm sure most of you already know why we're here." I looked at Midnight, sitting on the table in front of me. He nodded. Oh, it was probably a social media thing. If anything was really important, though, he'd tell me. Or the brigade would alert me. Swiss Arms gestured, and a video began to play. I wondered if the other rooms were getting a recording of people standing in front of the video, or just the video directly. It was Dr. Doomsday addressing people from one of his official accounts. It was a subject of much debate whether to allow villains to have official accounts because of the chaos they could cause, but ultimately it had come down to them following certain rules. Ultimately, Dr. Doomsday had to follow less of those rules because if people tried to stop him, he just hacked into official city accounts, which was quite embarrassing. So-called portal powers. They could be available to everyone if the government was willing to give up their stranglehold on supers. I kind of agreed, at least on a top level, but I also knew that Dr. Doomsday didn't have the best interests of the public in mind. He certainly hadn't ever seriously advocated for others to have powers. Thus, I have decided to announce my plans in advance just this once. The map you see behind me will be where the portals generate. Do with that information what you will. The video feed was cut. It seemed like there was more, but maybe it hadn't been deemed relevant. Swiss Arms stood resolutely at the front of the room. "He's planning to cause chaos," she said. "No, he already has. People are flooding towards the locations in question, hoping to gain powers. And if this is anything like the other portal incidents, monsters will come out. It'll be a bloodbath. We're preparing assignments involving defense, crowd management, and portal negation. I will now collect questions, and we will try to provide answers to them all." "Shouldn't we just be out there?" I asked. "Heroes have already been sent," Swiss Arms explained. "Mostly, they will attempt to keep the crowds relatively calm. Since people are already gathering, it's too late to head them off." Midnight was next. "How does this benefit Dr. Doomsday? Despite how much villains might like chaos, it's usually a distraction for something else." "There are several options," Swiss Arms explained, pulling up a slide that was obviously quickly prepared. Her arm popped open to reveal a laser pointer, which seemed like an unnecessary addition to me. But I supposed her mods didn't necessarily care how much space they took up. Distraction is obvious. He might be intending to open more portals while there are distractions, worsening our response times. There could also be other crimes planned, heists perhaps. It could also be a long-term ploy to lower the confidence in the hero and mercenary system. People had a bunch of questions, but mostly I wanted to know what I was supposed to do. And the answer was to head out, disguised, and try to see if I could do something about some of the portals before their official opening time. "Why a parrot?" Midnight asked. "Because," I explained, "parrots sit on shoulders and can talk. It makes the most sense." Parrots don't actually talk, though. They just repeat words and phrases with minimal understanding. "It's that or risk getting your tail stepped on," I said. "Very few cats ride around people's shoulders out in the city, so you'd be too obvious even if you changed looks." "I'm not sure I'll make a good parrot," Midnight said. "But hopefully the illusion will take care of that." It did. At least when he wasn't moving much. The different number of limbs didn't help things, but we weren't expecting people to be looking all that closely anyway. Getting to our target location took some work. The target was a park, and it was already packed with people. Cars were parked at random spots around the area. Traffic was blocked for several blocks out. People really wanted powers. Maybe I should just call extra and give the people what they wanted so they could leave safely. Not everyone was there for powers, some just wanted to watch, which seemed pretty foolish. There were news crews, including one familiar Channel 72 group. I would have stopped to speak with them, but we were disguised. I looked like some guy, just some random human dude. There was no reason to get complicated with that sort of thing. Some people were trying to leave, it looked like, but the press of people was making it difficult for anyone to go anywhere. The noise of the crowd was intense, but one voice was easily heard through a megaphone. I doubt anyone will listen to reason at this point, but New Bay is officially warning you that this is a danger zone. I looked to see Castle floating over the crowd. I didn't know all that much about her, except that she was one of the heroes that could have a proper slugging match with Dr. Doomsday. Catching him was something else, but she was pretty high tier. I think her power was density control. Flight wasn't on there, and I didn't think she could reduce her density to be similar to air. Ah, that was it. I could feel another power, telekinesis. The lot of you might not care that you're now in violation of city ordinances. After all, as heroes we refuse to harm anyone, she continued. But I'm just making a public announcement now that all of your illegally parked vehicles are going to be tossed over to the impound lot. If you can get back to your car and drive it out, that would be best. If not, we can carry you to clear streets. But if you don't care about your cars, feel free to ignore this advice. Great Girl would have enjoyed tossing cars to the impound lots. She might not fit in the crowds without knocking people over, though. She was assigned to some other location since there were two high-profile heroes here. There was Castle, of course, and there was also Captain Control. I was pretty sure I could feel him lifting some cars, proving that it wasn't a bluff on their part. He was also the one responsible for Castle's flight. I cast Arcane Sight for midnight so we could pick out any potential problems. Maybe pre-portals. We'd never had the opportunity to spot Doomsday's stuff before, but it wasn't always him firing a portal gun in random directions. He definitely set up some of them beforehand with hidden devices. It would be easier if we could fly, but that would kind of lose all subtlety. So I had to carefully push my way through the crowd. If I was going to put a portal, it would be near the middle of the park. Chapter 348. Spotting the portal was easier than getting to it. Even though it wasn't active, once Midnight and I got close enough, it stood out as a vague, shimmering area. I would say it was on the small end of mid-sized. I supposed portals could probably be whatever size someone could afford the power and technique to set up. But there was a limit to practical sizes. Below that, a standard humanoid couldn't easily fit through, so the starting range in my mind was about 1 human wide. This had enough room for 3 people to fit comfortably. You could probably shove a handful through in parallel without too much trouble. A bit less than 10 feet wide made it smaller than Gate started out. Relatedly, smaller than most portals Dr. Doomsday made. Hopefully that meant it would fit fewer monsters through when everything went wrong. Well, there it is. Or at least, there's one, I commented. We needed to report back to the brigade. Saying things straight up could tip off people in the crowd, but trying to hide that I was talking remotely would be a pain. Maybe I should use sending. It wouldn't be a good report, but it would be something. Just hold up your phone, Midnight suggested. People will barely be able to hear you anyway. It was a good thing he could pick out what I was having trouble with and that he was right next to my ear. Because people were loud, it was super crowded, or maybe just regular crowded, since a super might be able to compress more space into the area somehow. Oh right, I'll do that. I pulled out my phone while making sure my mic was transmitting to the brigade. Yeah, hi. Lot of people here, I'm sure you can hear them. I found something really interesting at the park. I sent some coordinates. Technology was great. Also, I suppose I could have texted. I might find some other neat things if I keep looking, but I'd also like to see things up close and see if I can do something. The problem is there are so many people. In short, I wasn't certain there was just one portal. There could be more. It would also be difficult just to get to the one I knew was there to try to close it. It wasn't even open yet, so maybe locking it would be more correct. Continue to check out the wider area, came a reply into my ear. We'll try to arrange someone to manage that location if you can't get to it in time. We had probably half an hour now, assuming the timing was exactly as Dr. Doomsday declared. That was enough time to go anywhere between 2.5 steps loop around the park. Castle and Captain Control were doing a good job of clearing people out around the edges of the park, and traffic was able to flow away. But some people were being idiots and trying to drive into the restricted area, even as cops put up barricades. Great Girl would have probably stopped being nice with people's cars. Despite what she said, Castle wasn't actually tossing people's cars. Then again, they'd only had a minute or two of notice, and honestly might not have been able to reach them yet. That way, Midnight gestured with his beak. He was currently a parrot, after all. Not an actual parrot, just the looks of one plastered over a cat. Imperfect, but there were so many weird things in this city that it would probably be fine. I followed Midnight's advice, and he actually navigated me through the flow at a fairly quick pace. After about a quarter circle, I had the feeling there weren't going to be additional portals. We should just make it to the center now, yeah? Absolutely, Midnight said. Go behind that guy. I wasn't sure how much was his natural instincts and how much was his suit doing some sort of calculations or whatever, but it was very helpful. We actually got to the location with nearly 5 minutes to spare, instead of going nowhere. All right. Now then, how would we go about? It was then that space tore apart in front of me. I instinctively reached out with mana, but without gathering any ahead of time, it was pretty much just ripped away as the portal opened exactly as intended. I presumed. I was then shoved through the portal by the press of bodies. It's open. This is our chance. What the hell were these people doing? They didn't need to go through the portal. Just be near it, though for full unlocks. Whatever. If they went through, they'd just end up on random city streets. With cars. Good thing these cars were small and had good brakes. It didn't leave a lot of room for more people to come through. At least there weren't any monsters. This was just Japan, which was safe. Well, Japan had some monsters. It was one of the supernatural hubs for whatever reason. But it shouldn't have too many. It would be fine as long as... This is Earth number 2, isn't it? I asked Midnight as I looked around. There wasn't anything that actually looked different, but the mana is too plentiful. It might not be. Either way, we should probably deal with that. Midnight gestured with a wing towards the mass of people coming through the portal. They managed to squeeze a dozen at once. Time to drop the disguises. I guess so, Midnight said. Great. Do you want to do the speech? Well, I would, but you're so eloquent. By which I mean blunt, and I don't think this is the situation to talk to people nicely. I couldn't close the portal with people actively moving through it. Well, I wouldn't. If I had Wall of Stone, I could fully block off the portal. I'd use Fire Shield, but not everyone was fully responsible for their own movements. If I could get some room, a shelter would look like it blocked things off. But I doubted it could stand up to a couple people kicking it for long, let alone a crowd. I dropped disguise, intentionally unraveling it, as I stepped up on the hood of a car. Everyone, listen up. You're not going to get any more powers for pushing further into this place. You're just going to get lost in a parallel dimension. So get back to the correct side of the portal and everything will be fine. There were a bunch of people yelling complaints. I couldn't really make out most of them, but some were from the other side of the portal, probably people who thought it was unfair they wouldn't get powers. You don't need to pass through the portal. It works with proximity. Revealing truths some people would probably prefer be unknown was better than chaos. Just walk past it. Anyone who ends up on this side is going to get buried in paperwork by Extra. Spread the word. Fewer people were pushing through, and some were actually leaving. Everything was going so well until the other portals opened up, and if they had been to Earth number 1, that would have been inconvenient but fine. Instead, they were obviously portals from the Scouring. Maybe they could sense the heightened emotions. Monsters did that sort of thing. I blasted a sonic lance into the first pack to poke through. Damn it! Midnight, he had leapt off my shoulder before I got on the car. He replied through our shared comms. I already got in contact with the magical girls. Swapping from civilian chaos to monster chaos will be fine for them. He had a series of firebolts in response to some more monsters. Component enhanced, probably. He could carry a little bit of stuff in his suit. There was a big swarm of monsters coming. At least they chose one side for their jumble of portals to be on, so I could vaguely aim a blizzard at all of them. Just before I finished gathering mana, I noticed a vending machine with ice in it. I did the sensible thing and only drew upon a fistful of it as I pressed my hand up against the machine. I was quite concerned about damaging the city's infrastructure or myself if I tried to consume too much. A vending machine was just a thin box like anything else, and I managed to use some of the ice. It was a good thing that the local civilians were very good at fleeing from dangerous situations for the most part. Something I kind of wished New Bays had picked up. About half a block was coated in ice, with my targets in the middle being quite a bit thicker. Some of them actually faded away into smoke as they instantly died, leaving behind only an icy outline. There was a loud sound as pavement suddenly exploded. I just barely saw something slip through the top part of the portal. The one from Earth number 1, not the monster portals. Captain Punch stood up. "Hey, civilians! This guy already told you to run, didn't he? Get going." He literally tossed a pair of people through the portal over the heads of others. That was not my problem. Fortunately, he immediately followed up by charging towards the next monster out of the biggest portal. It had too many eye stalks. There was a responsible number of eye stalks to have, and it was way beyond that. He grabbed the largest two of them, ignoring the spikes all over the thing as his hands squeezed down. Then he swung it at other creatures, shattering icy statues and previously undamaged monster bodies until his improvised weapon fell apart. Captain Punch then shoved his fist straight through the torso of some sort of demon cow. As far as I was aware, he was the most bruiser anyone could get. He hit fast, he hit hard. It looked like he was fighting an army of paper the way he tore through them. With all of the monster gore, even if it didn't last long after the deaths of the scouring, he was really good at getting people to run. Too bad only about half of them went back through the portal. More of them scattered. Captain Punch actually found the time to toss a series of cars to block anyone else from exiting the portal as things were dying down. Some other supers had secured the far side. "Go through and close it," he said. "With you here? Still got civilians on this side. I'll round 'em up. You go back through." Do you speak Japanese?" His face told me he did not. "I'll leave familiar with you. In case it wasn't obvious, when the magical girls show up, they're on our side, including any cute and colorful fellows with them if you can see them. Very helpfully coded world." "Great," he said, grabbing me and tossing me through the remaining clear space in the portal over the hoods of two cars facing each other. I wondered about the cars. The Power Brigade executives should probably care about collateral damage. But also that might be the perfect reason to intentionally make use of things instead of letting people get hurt. The cross-dimension thing might be an issue, though. Maybe the magical girls could repair busted cars like they did sidewalks. Castle was angrily glaring at a mob, as if daring anyone to step closer. Some idiots were still trying to move past her, but she literally just moved an arm in front of them and they couldn't push forward an inch. I began closing the portal. I figured announcing it wouldn't help, as people might be desperate. Even though it went to the wrong place, we might have to educate people on portal powers now that Doomsday was using it for chaos. The portal resisted me. I had pulled out my staff to back up Captain Punch, mostly to block monsters from fleeing, and I still had it out. I looked around annoyed for whatever was blocking me, as I was certain this portal didn't naturally want to exist. Arcane Sight was still active and picked out a small something buried in the dirt, and I jabbed my staff there, pushing out the stored dispel. The portal collapsed quickly, though I think it wouldn't have gone so well without my active encouragement. Most likely it would have lingered for a while. "No more portal," Castle said. "Clear out." She turned to me. "You afraid of heights?" I shook my head. Midnight wasn't with me, so it was fine. "Not at all." Castle reached out and grabbed my wrist. "Try not to resist." It was a good thing she said that, because I absolutely would have. I felt really weird for a moment, and then she tucked my arm over her shoulder and jumped. I normally expected more resistance to acceleration, but it was like my body wasn't weighing me down at all, which maybe it wasn't. We fluttered down gently onto a rooftop, which was weird because if our mass was reduced enough that air friction slowed our movement, then how did we gain height? Was it some sort of constant manipulation? A secondary power? I should have had my goggles on. Either way, it was clearly all Castle. "We're not done," she noted. "We'll need multiple jumps, but it's faster than trying a car. There's more portals to handle, and you're one of the city's most reliable sources of closing them." If the city got a bunch of level 15 mages, they could probably do it too with training, though having more than the standard 10 mana available was quite helpful. Bolster was strong enough that I should teach her. I could make my own portals for her to close with altar portal after all. Jerome too, since he liked utility things like that, and he might need it in the future. But that was for when I wasn't busy dealing with a chaotic city. Chapter 349. The details of what happened when Midnight and I were apart were usually shared only as a summary, key information about magic or enemies, plus whatever we felt like talking about. Only rare instances deserved a play-by-play. This story only came to me after Midnight returned from Earth number 2, but because of what happened, I really needed the full details from him. So I got the detailed account, play-by-play. The portal to Earth number 1 closed, leaving Midnight and Captain Punch on the other side of a pile of cars. "Hey," Captain Punch's words were punctuated by his movements. "Could you—" He continued to annihilate the scouring as they crawled out of the series of nearby portals. "Chase down civilians who ran too far." "I don't have any sound amplification abilities," Midnight said, "and they'll have gone in different directions." "Fair enough." Captain Punch grabbed a spiky fellow and bowled him into a line of his fellows, pushing the encroaching horde back through the portal. He paused for a moment, took a deep breath, then yelled, "Hey, citizens of New Bay, I told you to run, but don't go too far." Then he tore some sort of lizard in half. "It's a good thing that the scouring turn into nothing when they die," Midnight commented, looking at me. "Otherwise it would have been pretty gruesome." "Same with Strife," I said. "There would be blood everywhere from those quills." Anyway, I tossed a few cheaper spells, aware I would need to conserve my mana for the gate back, maybe some scrying, things like that. And then, burning arrows fell from the sky. "Phoenix rain," a voice shouted as the arrows turned into burning walls of intense flame, blocking off the portals. Captain Punch took advantage of the opportunity to shove a 7-horned bull into the open portal in front of him, holding it there with one hand as it tried to gore him, its hooves tearing up the ground. "I hope your repair crew is good, kid," he commented as Burning Cupid landed, "because I declare any damage caused here as permissible under the Interdimensional Emergency Act of 1915. "There's one of those?" I asked. "Why doesn't Great Girl use that one?" "I think he made that up," Midnight said. "Now could you stop interrupting?" "Sorry." Burning Cupid landed in front of him as she leapt from a nearby building, flames swirling around her as Caroline the Phoenix circled overhead. "I don't speak English." "Blah, where's Calculator when you need him? Or Swiss Arms, or Lady Light, or—" "I speak English." Pink Angel arrived, bringing along with her excessive amounts of the color pink, as well as her Humoran companion, also pink. She looked over Captain Punch. "A real-life American superhero, huh? Where's Mage?" "He had to go, closing the portal that used to be behind those cars," Captain Punch gestured. "I heard you can fix stuff." "It will be a bit difficult with them piled on each other." "Oh, I can unstack them now," Captain Punch said. "But about these portals—" He was still holding the bull with one hand. "They should close soon. Do you need help with that?" "Nah, it's fine. This guy's getting tired." Midnight interrupted with some commentary. At that point, they started talking about more complex issues, and I cast Translate on Captain Punch, since that was the easiest thing. We talked about finding the New Bay citizens. There were a good number just hanging around. And the magical girls commented that they would put the word out to try to get random English-speaking strangers. The portals closed, monsters were hunted, and people began cleaning up. That's when the ninjas showed up. Midnight was just minding his own business when suddenly something magical was coming at him at high speed. He leapt to the side, his suit augmenting his movements even from a bad position. A shuriken impacted his force armor, suddenly negating it. Then there were several more all at once. More than he could hope to dodge, from many different angles. Midnight dashed for some sort of cover, taking several direct hits. With his force armor gone, his combat suit had to take the blows. Fortunately, it held. Midnight tried to sense where his foes were, but whatever magical traces they had were hidden well enough to stay unnoticed. With some cover, he had fewer angles for attacks to come from, But that didn't seem to stop them, as he saw flying shuriken curve through the air. Then they bounced off of something solid. "Hey ninjas, what do you have against my buddy here?" Captain Punch looked over his shoulder towards midnight. Would I be causing some sort of interdimensional incident if I cracked some ninja skulls? I'm pretty sure they're not from this reality. Good enough. He bent down in the middle of the street and scooped it up. Part of the street, specifically. When the ninjas launched another round of attacks, he chucked asphalt at surrounding buildings. Some chunks hit the buildings themselves, but there were a few cries of pain. Midnight vaguely heard a complaint, translated for his ears. Can't hurt him. Powers, be negated. Resistant somehow. Captain Punch scooped up Midnight in the crook of his arm, blocking every incoming attack. Midnight paused there. I could feel his unease. Captain Punch jumps really high. I gave him a good pat on the head. It's okay. You're here now. Back to the story. Strife joined in on the action. You guys again. How dare you? Lady Eglantine dashed around the battlefield, providing rainbow light that revealed ninja after ninja. Captain Punch began grabbing some and tossing them into a pile, while Strife hit some of them with small quills, specifically targeting their legs and hands so they couldn't run or attack properly. Even so, the ninjas kept coming for Captain Punch, which made no sense. Until several moved in at once, hands free. Midnight felt one of them touch him. That first ninja got shocked. Relatedly, I've gotten pretty good at only shocking what I want to, Midnight bragged, not just whatever I touch. That's great, I agreed. Shocking Grasp was one of his best spells to go with his agility. I lasered the second one. The third one got a hand on me, until his wrist was crushed. It doesn't really make sense. I frowned. Well, we did make enemies with them in the past. I'm assuming those were the underground elves. Yeah, but they weren't really trying to kill me. The shuriken. Midnight shook his head. They couldn't have expected that to be enough. They wanted to weaken me before going in. We've got to thank Captain Punch for keeping you safe, I said. Sounds like an awful situation. I'd usually never say I preferred people trying to kill me, but Midnight tilted his head. I really dislike the idea of them trying to snatch me. Same with Flash Circuit. I don't want to be a hostage. You're too strong to be a good hostage. Unless they can get power negators on me, then I'm just a cat. Except for your suit, right? Well, yeah. I pondered for a few moments. I don't know of a specific way to stop people from using magic, but it probably exists, like the anti-magic weapons they already have, but not so expendable. I made a face. It's weird, though. Not just that they were trying, but that they were there at all. Are they working with Dr. Doomsday? Flash Circuit? Is everyone in a big conspiracy? Oh, right. The incident. Midnight had gotten all of the people who came through the portal back. He checked with scrying for people from Earth number 1. He'd actually cast Gate himself to get back. He'd been technically able to cast it since he hit level 27. That incident had pushed him over level 28, which meant he wasn't hitting the very edge of his fatigue threshold, which was a much more comfortable position to be in. So everything was resolved for the moment. But back to worrying about conspiracies. I honestly don't know, Midnight admitted. It would have been pretty hard to predict that we were going to appear there. You'd need to be able to see the future. I frowned so hard my tusks nearly broke skin. You know, there is someone like that, somewhere in that world. Or at least she was. Do you think she joined the bad guys? I don't know, I admitted. Helping Izzy once doesn't mean much, especially not if Master Yuvathar is actually in hiding from her instead of with her, or separately from her, but as part of their own conspiracy thing. There's one issue there. We have non-detection on most of the time. Wouldn't that make it hard to predict our future? I wish I knew, I admitted, but we do know she's strong enough to break it. Sure, but mine hasn't been messed with today. It's still fully… What? It's actually gone. Now we need to find her even more, if only we could figure out how. Maybe it just involved throwing ourselves at it more wholeheartedly. We could gain an upgrade or two in advanced divination magic. Heck, we could even buy those right now. Between the two of us, maybe we could wear her down and finally reveal her. Or maybe there was some technique we could learn officially. My formal education had been mostly early stuff and self-study since I hadn't been able to actually get most spells. I guess we'll figure that out later, Midnight said. What about what happened here? Oh, that? Well, you know, standard stuff. Castle carried me atop the buildings, leap after leap, heading towards another portal. There were already monsters falling out of the sky. Why is there a portal there? I commented. Castle explained helpfully. That's one of his stated locations. Well, not quite. It's next to the tower mentioned. We're not sure if it's a mistake or part of the plan. There's more chaos with things being dumped on the city instead of just on the roof of the tower. That was one of the few places we managed to fortify. As we got closer, I realized they weren't really monsters. Or at least, that wasn't the most correct description. Ooh, robots, I said. But why don't they feel, They might just be advanced tech. What should they feel like? Castle asked. And what's the difference? Well, if it was super tech, they'd feel like powers. And they just don't. Advanced tech just works. If we had the intermediate knowledge required to construct things, we could just replicate it here. And by we, I mean someone else. I don't have time to get into that stuff. Learning about magic is already keeping me very busy. Does it make them tougher to fight? For you? Probably not. As for me, I guess it depends on if they expected to be hit by lightning. Surely they'd be insulated. Yeah, but most lightning isn't trying to kill you. It's usually a coincidence. Midnight interrupted. Where do you think the robots came from? Why would they just be sitting, waiting to attack? That's still being looked into, I shrugged. Anyway, they weren't really in any recognizable forms. The robots were like monsters in that they didn't fit to any recognizable form. At best, they had vaguely familiar limb structures. Many of them could fly, or at least glide. Others caught onto the nearby buildings as high as possible, climbing claws dragging gouges into the sides. And still others just hit the ground. Surprisingly, few of those became inoperable even after leaving the ground full of craters. Castle stopped. I can't leap high enough to get onto that roof. We might be able to climb up the backside. I looked at the situation and took stock of my mana. I can get up there. You can be really light, right? Yeah. Do that. I cast Fly on myself. The situation wasn't so urgent that teleporting with Dimension Door was worth the extra mana, not when I could have an ability that would last for a while for cheaper. Then I picked up Castle, much the same way she'd been carrying me. Oh man, I missed an even cheaper option. Cheaper? She asked. I can tell you if we ever join up for power training. Otherwise, I'm going to have to say the details are a brigade secret. But if she could make us both extremely light, with enough versatility and control that she could bypass the issues of air friction, I could probably have just picked us up with Mage's reach. Normal physics wouldn't let that work, but I didn't get counterforce on my actual body, so it probably would have worked. Fly was good though, as I carried Castle up to the roof, only for her to jump into the portal. I can't close it with you in there, I called after her, flying closer. Well, I mean, I could. You can shrink it a little at a time, right? She asked as she held her arms in front of her face, blocking shots from a Gatling gun of some sort. She sure had confidence in herself to fight actual advanced tech like that. This portal is way too wide and too many things are coming out. I'll stem the tide until you get it smaller. That actually makes sense, I said. I'll do my best. If I trapped her on the other side, I could probably figure out how to make a gate at some point. Chapter 350. Portal manipulation should count as a fight. I was actively working against something, whatever mechanisms Dr. Doomsday used to create and sustain the effect, for one. I didn't know if it did, and I certainly wasn't going to be keeping my experience window open to try to figure it out. I was just putting my thoughts out to the universe in the hopes I got more experience. Castle was doing all the actual fighting. She had pulled a shield from somewhere, a thin sheet of metal that she unfolded. It didn't look like much, but with her power going through it, it seemed to block the various assaults of the robots on the other side. It was too bad I didn't have any enchantments on her, so I probably wouldn't be getting any experience from that. Though perhaps she was powerful enough that it wasn't a real challenge anyway. Stray lasers and bullets still made it past her. She couldn't block the whole portal, though fortunately the bots were happy enough to mainly focus on her. A few pushed past, which generally involved dropping towards the streets, or gliding at best. Other supers would deal with that, though. I flew closer to the portal, staying low to keep out of the trajectory of attacks. A spiky, round bot nearly landed on my head, but I thwacked it with my staff. It didn't seem particularly injured, but we were launched towards opposite sides and it continued to fall. Soon I was beneath and then behind the portal, the safest side to be, assuming someone was handling the rest. Slowly I began to tug on the edges. I might be able to close it all at once, but that would be a large effort and leave Castle trapped. She was strong, but not necessarily to the level it would be safe to trap her in another world while being swarmed by enemies. Plus, the city probably wanted her for other incidents today. She could fight Dr. Doomsday, so I wanted her around. I shrunk the portal until no more bots were getting out, then flew above and slightly in front to get a visual on the situation after applying some defensive spells. Stone Skin and Energy Ward seemed prudent. Indeed, as I became visible, I was targeted past Castle's protection. "I'm going to need to finish closing the portal," I warned. "You should get out of there." It was hard to hear anything over the sounds of gunfire and lasers impacting Castle, but I was fairly certain she responded in the affirmative. Either way, I began carefully shrinking the remaining portal. If she wasn't out by the time it was a yard round, I would drag her out. It didn't help that the bots were shouting something about extra-dimensional intruders. What language was that? Clearly not English, but I'd heard it before. "Hey, can you stop shooting and stuff? We didn't make this." It was unclear if my attempt at diplomacy did anything, which means it was several times better than that Angel incident. At least they didn't get more violent. Castle ducked out of the portal, dangling on the edge for a moment. I didn't want to find out what would happen if I shrunk the side she was holding onto, so I worked on shrinking the portal from the other end. At least I was capable of such modular decisions. I'd first really experimented with that on Earth number 2. It was really good for intentionally hurting things. Once the portal was about a foot tall, or because she was tired of having her fingers shot at. Castle swung towards the roof. I rapidly tied up the rest of the portal, slicing through a metal cannon that was pointing out. The surge of mana was rather disappointing. Maybe whatever caused that portal closing mana generation was world-dependent. "I have a little more flying time," I commented to Castle. "It's probably more convenient than jumping." "You should have started with that," she laughed. "I can't do it forever. Next portal?" I looked down to see one of the bots get smashed by another. Was that Chuck down there? I think he was red, so it could have been. Something about the shape of one of the bots seemed familiar. The bots were sort of a funny shape. The heads of the humanoid ones in particular hadn't been entirely round. Oh, that was it. Kithay's language. I hope Earth number 3 didn't get too mad about us breaking their stuff. Though they probably ended up in our world first. Unless someone threw something into the portal when it opened. Dr. Doomsday might also have provoked them on purpose. Anyway, I summarized to Midnight, I helped close a couple more, others faded on their own or were dealt with by heroes or mercs. The city survived, you survived, everything seems all right. Not great though, Midnight replied. Far more people were hurt, both before and during the incidents. And most of them won't even get portal powers, I said. Maybe none of them, except the normal ratio for traumatic incidents in New Bay. I didn't personally see any portals that would have led to my old world or any of its planes, but there might have been some. Midnight nodded. I'm not certain what Dr. Doomsday gained from this. There wasn't even a good reason for people to listen to him in the first place, and now any power fanatics aren't going to fall for this again, unless they're just crazy. I thought it was pretty crazy to listen to him once, I pointed out. Maybe. But if you didn't have powers, what do you think you might do to get them? Probably some dangerous stuff, right? I'm not sure if I'm a good example. I'm from a world where everyone has powers. Midnight shook his head. Here in New Bay, people might feel like that. They see them every day, and yet they don't. So it's a lot like you. I just needed a way to get experience, though. And everyone else probably just thinks they needed a way to get powers. I was busy thinking about how many people per day I could put through a gate, safely. A few hundred worked if they were going one way, but people would probably need to go in and out. I wasn't sure how long people needed to be around stuff to get proper class unlocks either. It took several hours off-plane to get natural growth, but that wasn't an issue. Unlocking a class in general only took a few moments of exposure. Probably thousands of people could walk near a gate. If we just gathered everyone in New Bay who wanted powers, it would only take forever. I'd have to hit tens or hundreds of thousands to make a decent dent in the population, and people probably wanted that. But if I got enough, and those people grew to be able to make their own gates, well, they'd need some connection to my old world. Would getting powers from there be enough? This is a difficult topic, I concluded. Yeah. Anyway, we have to presume Dr. Doomsday got something besides chaos, but there wasn't any big break-in that anyone will admit to. I nodded. So, what next? We kind of need to know why ninjas were after you. Or rather, after you on Earth number 2. Did they know you'd be there? Are they working with Zenthar? Could they be? They're from the same world. Why wouldn't they be able to? I just assumed they'd be enemies with her. I shrugged. Unless she's one of the bad guys, though there's probably multiple factions of them, so how do we find her? Have we decided we're doing that? When? Well, either she's working with them or could otherwise tell us something, I said, and she was somewhere in that same world. So we come up with a search method there and either find her or determine she left. We'll resolve one thing at least. Midnight nodded. Sounds a bit risky though. What if she's dangerous? If she is, for some reason, working with ninjas, it could be a trap, or it could be a trap anyway. Or she could just be a more experienced and more powerful mage, capable of taking on both of us at once. Right. I hadn't really thought about that. Just because she was a divination specialist didn't mean she couldn't chuck meteor swarms at us. If we knew what she was going to use, it would be different, of course. Maybe we should get the brigade involved. But we'd also have to talk to the magical girls. Why not ask them directly? Midnight commented. They've got enough garbage to handle from their own world, I said. Plus, they don't fight humans and wouldn't get paid for it. Anyone we bring with us might not get paid either, unless you're willing to give up your pay. Most of the material component testing had been on the Power Brigade's budget. I'm not really hurting for cash right now. My main expense is rent. Once I'd gotten stabilized, I really hadn't needed more money. You're investing, right? I have talked to the brigade's financial advisors and did what they recommended. Also, I don't think we're allowed to make any directly. Why not? Midnight asked. Divination magic. They don't want powers to affect the economy. Directly, I guess. Obviously, it will still happen. Can they enforce that? I frowned. Why, are you worried about something? Midnight shook his head. I was just wondering. I assumed the people concerned about future stuff are just as invested as Extra and their extra-dimensional and extraterrestrial branches. Or maybe they have a department that covers that. Extratemporal? Midnight tilted his head. I really hope that doesn't come up often. Anyway, I said, we should bring some magic-resistant mercs and try to find Zenthar. Or the other way around, but people will need to be on standby for an afternoon or something. Maybe once things settle down here, Midnight said. I shrugged. We can't help with repairs anyway. If there are any lingering portals, though. The next few days involved a lot of messaging and very little actual action on the part of myself or Midnight. Sierra wanted to know if there might suddenly be a bunch of new druids. I mentioned that people probably didn't get a lot of portal powers. She sounded disappointed. I'm glad she wasn't trying to monopolize anything. What was a bigger deal, to some, was what Kithe discovered. Or rather, what happened involving Kithe. She was brought to the labs to help repair and analyze some of the robot debris when she recognized the technology involved. I probably should have mentioned that I recognized the language, but that was the same day, and I'd been concerned about Midnight's return. Also Captain Punch, but I'd assumed he would be fine. It didn't really bother me if some random executive got hurt anyway. Extra wanted to talk to me and Kithe about that world. She didn't want to go back. I was a terrible choice for diplomacy, so mostly they asked her for information on the dimension so they could mitigate future conflicts. I got the feeling Extra was annoyed with Doomsday. These portal incidents were probably a pain. Speaking of which, I was called upon to provide translation services a few times. Helpfully, Midnight could do it as well, and Bolster, and Jerome, if they just needed someone to cast the spell and not to remain in any sort of danger zone. I might suggest he be considered for an internship with Extra or something. People here thought he was too young to work full-time or whatever, but it wasn't like he could actually cast spells all day anyway. I was willing to bet I could even teach him to help close portals, just in case. And the more things I taught him that I didn't want to do, the less I'd have to do them. A perfect arrangement, since he could get experience doing normal, boring stuff.